Hello. It's good to see you here. So why are you here? What are you doing here? What do you want to discover about discovery? Growing your mind. What else? What? Perfect answer. That's true. Okay, it's good to see you. Good to see you again. So I know many of you, so I will not spend too much time on introducing myself. The key thing is that I work independently, and I work with organizations who want to change. So in preparing this talk, I decided that I wanted to. I had three personal goals when I was developing this talk. The first goal is that I'd like to provide you with a kind of perspective which includes many different point of views. Sometimes I see, like, flame wars, religion wars about different interpretations of what Agile is, what lean is, and why we should do one over the other, and blah, blah, blah. And I think that an approach that is more inclusive than exclusive usually works much better, meaning rather than excluding something, we try to include it into a larger vision, a larger picture. That usually works better, at least works better for me. My other goal was I wanted to clarify some of the general sources of confusion that I noticed when I help organizations to change. And the third one is, of course, suggest things that you can do in practice to probably help your corporate culture to change a little bit, or maybe your own mindset to change a little bit. So these are my three personal goals. Okay? And let's move on. Let's see how this is going to evolve. First of all, I need to provide some context. So let's say that you want to run a business, and I'm talking about any kind of business. It could be, like baking bread, or selling cars, being a lawyer, whatever. Any kind of business. Now, first of all, your business needs to be profitable and needs to be sustainable, repeatable. Okay? Otherwise, your business is not going to last very long if it is not profitable and repeatable. And that's the kind of mindset that is more related to executing a business model. We keep executing the same thing because we know that it works and it provides profits. But before that, there was probably another stage, which I like to call the discovery phase or the discovery stage. And the discovery is all about finding out what works compared to what doesn't work. It's all about validating hypotheses. So even if you are in a very simple or very well-established business model, like, then again, having a bakery, so you bake bread and you sell bread, so very simple, but someone had to find out that that kind of approach was going to be profitable and sustainable. And so they need to experiment. They need to run experiments and then separate valid hypotheses from invalid hypotheses. And that's the discovery phase, which comes before executing a business model. Once you are executing a business model, there's another thing that you can do. You can try to make it better. You can try to optimize it. And by optimizing it, for example, you might decide that you want to find out ways to scale your business model so that you can increase your margins, so you make it more profitable. And if you make it more profitable, the other thing you can do is to decide to invest some of the new resources that you are getting from optimizing your business model. You want to use those to do more discovery. You want to explore more. And that's the way, basically, that companies innovate. They devote part of their efforts to constantly exploring, running experiments, trying things that works over things that don't work, and that's the way they innovate. And innovation, of course, is a very good thing, especially in our business, which is evolving very, very, very fast. So if you are running a business model, probably you want to measure the business model, and then again, you can have KPIs, key performance indicators. And the KPIs for executing, for example, could be how much cash you are making over the costs that you are suffering. In terms of experiments, it could be how many experiments we want to run every day or every week. But in terms, then again, of developing a business model, it could be how viral is our business model, or how much are we spending to find a new customer, and so on, and so on, and so on. And the same thing is for optimization. So this is for a business model. But the same thing could work for product development. If you have a product, a very well-established product that people are selling, you still need to innovate. You still need to find what people want, what people need, so that you can provide a better service to them, and they will be happy to give you money. Okay? So you still need to find out something. And if you're doing product development, you still need to find ways to optimize the way you develop your product so you can become more efficient. So these three mindsets, discovery, execution, and optimization, are valid in business models, and they're valid in product development as well. One thing that I decided to look up when I was preparing this talk is this idea of project management. So I looked up on Google, on the Ngram viewer, and I searched for project manager. This is a service that will look up this sentence into thousands and thousands of books. And as you can see, the rise of project management started more or less in the 60s. Before that, we had no idea of project management. Before that, since we came from the Industrial Revolution, we were more about delivering products. It was more about product. And then after the 60s, we started thinking more about projects. But a project and a product are two very different things, right? I mean, a project has a very clear start and supposedly has a very clear end, and it has a very clear budget, and it's supposed to deliver a very clear outcome. So that's a project, right? A product is something that's constantly ongoing. It doesn't have a specific point in time where it ends, for example. It might take Coca-Cola, for example. Coke, that's a product that's been out there for decades and is still there. So, and we don't know when it will stop, right? So that's a product. But my point is that the mindset of the product manager or of a project manager are very different. Because a product is more about pulling something out. That's a product. The lating you can read up there. A project is more about throwing forward. Basically, a project is a transition, is a state change. Like 50 years ago, for example, a project could have been for Coca-Cola to relocate the headquarters to a new building. That would have been a project, something with a very clear budget, a very clear outcome, a starting date and an ending date. That would have been a project. But then after the project, you go back into a steady state again. Today, if you notice, it's project after project after project after project after project. There is no concept of steady state anymore. It's very different, and the mindset, then again, between a product and a project manager is very, very different. I didn't say product owner, I said product manager, okay? Now, we can take these three mindsets again, discovery, execution, and optimization, and try to see if some of the practices that we use every day, they relate to these mindsets. So for me, for example, the classical project management approach or waterfall started more or less in the 70s, okay, more or less. So these are more about executing a plan, as we know, right? So it's about monitoring what's going on, having clearly defined processes, or clearly define what to do and check that that's actually going to happen, and so on. That's why, for example, in waterfall, we pretend that we know everything from the beginning, so we do all the analysis first, then the design, then implementation, blah, 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 because that's a plan, okay? Lean, in my opinion, and by the way, just a little disclaimer, this is not science. This is my personal view over this subject, okay? I'm just sharing with you things that are helping me to better understand part of the complexity of the world, the business world I live in. Now, for me, for example, the Toyota production system, then Lean, and then Kanban more recently, are more about, then again, there's a lot of overlapping, but they're more about optimization. They're more about monitoring very clearly what's going on, managing queues, for example, managing cycle time, managing lead time, managing the work in progress, making sure that you not create bottlenecks, or you do not create inventory, and blah, 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 blah. It's a very lucid, it's a very analytical vision over what we are doing. There's also the tendency to address root problems, like the A3 thinking is a way to go deep into a problem and come up with possible solutions so that you can go to a desired state, okay? Which is a lot about system thinking as well. So, and that for me is the optimization mindset applied to Lean or vice versa. Agile, on the other hand, which came later compared to Lean and the Toyota production system, is more about discovery, is more about validating hypotheses. For example, the reason why we do things in iterations is because every iteration is a set of experiments. And then at the end of the iteration, we have a retrospective, as Ben was telling, or a review, and we validate the experiments. So it's more about experimenting, finding out, trying. That's why, for example, we want to have rich feedback. It's an empirical approach, right? We make decisions based on what we learn as we go. That's why we need feedback, okay? We try to decide where to invest first. We prioritize by value, even though value is a very fluffy and abstract concept that we need to understand better. And of course, these two mindsets, Lean and Agile, they do have things in common. There is some overlapping. Like, for example, visual feedback or visualizing the workflow, making everything visible, making everything transparent so that we can trigger collective intelligence, for example, because people can see the same problem all together and they can come up with intelligent solutions. Respecting people, which is one of the fundamental values in Lean. And in Agile, we say individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So the idea that what we do is inherently related to people because we do knowledge work, we don't do process work as in the factories. So the respect for people is shared by these two mindsets. From my point of view, when it comes to Agile, and when we talk about true product ownership, and I'll go back to this concept of product and project later, but the idea is that it's only when you really start to think in terms of experiments, hypotheses, managing risks, managing different options, taking risk, for example, accepting mistakes. It's only when you start thinking in this way that you get the real product ownership. Basically, you take ownership of how this thing that we don't know exactly what it is going to develop, but we're going to do experiments so that we can learn how it will develop. But many organizations stop at a much lower level. Many organizations that I see when they try to go to Agile, to adopt Agile, basically they stop at the iteration level. What they do is, okay, yes, we still have the business analyst, and then we just develop in iterations, but that's all they do. We can do better, of course. We can do much better. So I've been talking about business models, business KPIs, product development. I've been talking about practices. I've been talking about methods. Let's talk about attitudes. So if you are into a lean practice, obviously you also have a lean mindset. You have a lean attitude, a mental attitude, which for me, for example, is very much about analyzing what's going on. It's very scientific, very precise, very detailed, with a lot of useful information. If you are into the execution mindset, it's more about controlling things. It's more about monitoring, making sure that everything is going as planned, and probably telling people what to do. If you are into the Agile mindset, you're probably more into this idea that you need to try something out and see how it goes, accepting the outcome, which you might like or maybe not. And of course, with attitudes comes mind states and or emotions. Like, for example, if you really want to explore something, fear or uncomfort is something that comes into play. I mean, if you ever tried to take a walk in the woods alone at night, just to see how it feels like or what it is like, okay, it could be very exciting, but it could also be a little bit scary, right? So getting to be comfortable with this kind of emotions, I think it's important. Take, for example, I was talking previously about true product ownership. A true product owner must confront fear, at least the fear of making a big mistake. And you have to have the courage of facing that. But it could also be very exciting. There could be a lot of curiosity in what you want to do. Then again, talking about mindset and or emotions, if you are into the lean mindset, probably want to pay a lot of attention to details. You want to correlate cause with effect. It's very logical thinking. So if it is about execution, it's more about governance, basically. So my point is that all the things I've been talking about so far are actually correlated. They are interrelated. So these three dimensions, exploring, executing, and optimizing, they apply to many different layers in what we do, starting with the business model, the KPIs, the practices, the methods, the attitudes, the mindset, and so on, and so on, and so on. So my point is that if you, and which connects somehow to what Craig was saying this morning, you cannot expect profound change if you do not address also the psychological and organizational aspects of what we are doing. So you cannot expect any organization to be truly agile, for example, or truly lean, for example, if you do not address the mindset of being agile and or being lean. Otherwise, everything you do is very shallow. It doesn't really go deep. Okay? So it's all connected, that's my point. Now, if I had if I had to specifically talk about the discovery mindset, which is what I want to do, now the big scary monster related to discovery, as I mentioned, is called uncertainty. That's the scariest part about trying to discover something. The idea is that I just don't know. Okay, I just don't know. In our business, it happens very frequently that, for example, I know this very well as a consultant. You know, they call me in and they want solutions, they want recipes. They want something like, okay, if I do this, it will work, right? I don't know, I'm sorry. I have no idea. We have to try, we have to run experiments. We have to see what happens. We have to probe, sense, and respond, okay? I have no idea. So uncertainty is an unlikely mental state, is a mental state that most people don't like. Okay, especially managers. And it's usually described as a state of having limited knowledge about, is a state in which basically it's impossible to describe what's going on, where you are, what's going to happen, and which kind of outcomes you're going to face. That's the definition of uncertainty. But the thing is, for what we do, in the line of business that we are in, uncertainty is basically inevitable. I'm taking just this state with a quote from Steve Jobs. Once he said that a lot of times people don't know what they want until you show it to them. He was very innovative. He liked to create extraordinary products. And he didn't start with the assumption that he should use focus group to try to find out what people want. Sometimes he said, people just don't want. You need to show it to them. On the other hand, the opposite is true. You don't know what people want until you show it to them. I mean, it's bidirectional. They don't know if that's what they want, but you don't know if that's what they want. Okay? It's bidirectional. And the only way to find out is to try, to face uncertainty, to face risk, and try. And the reason why it's so complex, I just couldn't resist to put these two guys on the same slide together. The reason why it's so complex is, not complicated, complex, is because the gentleman on the right is Dave Snowden, okay? And the Kinevin framework, which you probably know. The reason why it's so complex is because once you put something out in the world, you're not facing the market, you're facing people. You have no idea how people are going to react. You have no idea how the world is going to react because it's a complex socio-biological system. You have no idea, there's no certainty there. So what we try to do with an empirical and iterative approach is to bring what is complex to something that is complicated. Complicated means that, okay, it's still manageable. I can assume there is some correlation of cause and effect. Complex, the correlation is not very clear and sometimes is unpredictable. So that's what we're trying to do. So uncertainty is inevitable. And if uncertainty is inevitable in our business, that also means that we're going to make mistakes. And companies react in different ways when it comes to mistakes. Like, let's take, for example, this guy. He's the founder of Spotify, Daniel Ek. And I like this sentence from Daniel Ek. He says, "We aim to make mistakes faster than anybody else." It's very different from what many managers would say, right? You wouldn't find many managers saying, "Yes, please, do mistakes, as many as you can, as fast as you can." Okay? But that's an interesting mindset. It's a mindset that says, we want to learn as fast as possible. We want to try, we want to learn so that we can explore our business domain and we can make decisions based on facts, on data that we gather as we go. Okay, that's what they're saying. So which kind of culture do you think is related to this kind of mindset? Certainly, it's not a blaming culture, right? You cannot blame people for making mistakes if they are supposed to make mistakes. But the problem is that this idea of uncertainty and embracing uncertainty is not so comfortable for many people, so they are reluctant. Maybe they say, "Oh yeah, sure, yes, we should do experiments, yeah, go for it," but they don't really like it. Okay. You see there's a kind of a dissonance between what they say and what they do. So this kind of inconsistent mindset has some interesting side effects, like something that I've seen in real life, like this thing which is called water scrum fall. I'm not kidding. I mean, I've seen that officially written in a financial offer for services. Yeah, we develop software for you, and we do this using a water scrum fall approach. Okay, that was in an official offer. Okay, and what they meant was that they do all the analysis at the beginning, then they do development in iterations, and then they do all the testing at the end. That's why it's called water scrum fall. Okay? Now, why would you want to do that? Because you're afraid. Because as a manager, you're afraid of losing control if you take an empirical approach. This idea that, I'm sorry, we don't know, we can make assumptions, we can make hypotheses, but then we have to validate those. Now, it's something that many managers are uncomfortable with. Not Daniel Ek. Now he's saying, go for it, make mistakes. Of course, make fail-safe mistakes. Make mistakes that are not going to bring the company to his knees, of course. They're not the mistakes that are not going to kill the company, but make mistakes. I've seen Agile waterfall, I've seen Scrum, but, oh yes, we do Scrum, but we don't do this and that and that and that. Like, we don't do retrospectives because it's uncomfortable. We need to talk about ugly stuff, okay? So Scrum, but. So yes, we pretend we're Agile, but no, sorry, we're not, because uncertainty we don't like. I've seen project owners, not product owners. Guys who were, good project managers up to 2 weeks ago, that they took a PO class and now they are product owners. Okay, but the mindset is still the mindset of a project manager. And as I said at the beginning or earlier, a product is very different from a project. Very different things. So you are applying, you gave people information, but you didn't help them to change the way they approach, for example, uncertainty and risk. And so they do the same thing they were doing previously, except with a different name tag, a different title on the business card. So what can we do? Which are the things that we can do to make this a little bit better? I don't want to say fix it, because it's not broken, but make it a little bit better. One thing for me is, for example, especially if you're a manager or if you're a leader, even a team leader of a group of 4 guys, but even if you're a manager or leader, it's extremely important to exercise what I call intellectual and emotional awareness. So what does it mean, intellectual awareness? Well, you have to know that if you're executing a plan, like for example a sprint, is a very well-defined, short-lived plan. It's a plan that lasts 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But if you are in executing mode, you have to know that there are certain things that are going to kick in your mind. If you are doing optimization, you have to be aware that you're doing optimization. So if you do Kanban rather than Scrum, you have to be very well aware that it's a different mindset. And if you do Agile, if you're a product owner, you have to know that the mindset is very different. So that's intellectual awareness, but also emotional awareness. You have to know as a product owner that you are going to face scary situations. It's just like taking a walk in the woods alone at night. Very exciting and can be scary, and that's okay. It's completely useless to pretend you're not concerned, you're not worried, you're not scared about trying something out. That's your job. Your job is to deal with uncertainty. So accept it. It's much easier. Accept it. It's like taking a walk in the woods at night. I also make a distinction between structural and contextual awareness, because each one of us is more inclined to one thing over the other. Like, for example, I know that I'm more inclined to exploration. In general, as a person, I like to explore. I like to try things out. When I get good at something, I usually change. I do something different. I like to explore. That's my structural mindset. But if you ask me to strictly follow a plan for 1 week, I can do that. I'm able to do that. If you ask me to look at a process and try to optimize it, I can also do that. I'm still more inclined to exploring, but given a certain context, I can also exercise other kind of mental faculties. So what I'm trying to say is that each one of us in this room can do all 3 of these things as long as you're aware of what you're doing. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Now, more things you can do. More things you can do. So the first one was be aware of what's happening. The second one is, if you want to implement discovery in your organization, in your company, whatever, you need to create a space for that. And Tom DeMarco, the author of Slack, defines Slack in two dimensions. One is people need to have the time to make experiments. As you can read there, it says that the principal resource needed for invention is Slack. When companies cannot invent, it's because they are too damn busy. People are just busy, bang, bang all the time, and they have just no time for inventing. Okay, they're just in execution, optimization mode all the time. So first of all, you need time, like 5% of the people's time, or 10%. It's up to you. The second thing you need is delegation of authority. If you want to let people to make mistakes, they need to feel comfortable with that. You need to provide a safe space, a safe environment where people can make mistakes in a very safe way. So what do I mean by safe? Not being blamed with no retaliation, no finger pointing. Yes, we made a mistake. And that's the second thing you can do. So awareness and creating a space. The third thing you can do is get a better understanding of this fluffy concept of value. Because of course value could be financial value, but it's very unlikely that you can really assess what will be the business value of implementing a certain feature. It's very unlikely. Sometimes it's possible. Like, for example, large financial organizations, credit card companies, for example, they have lots of data about what their users, their customers do. So for them, knowing that implementing this feature or the other can have certain financial return, maybe it's possible because they have a lot of data which is very objective. But at other times, value could be entirely strategic. What could be the value, for example, of running a business in an ethical way? What is the value of being ethical? How can you assess that? Okay. Another dimension for value is the willingness to invest. There are people that have, they have money to spend, and it's okay for them to try something out. Okay, they are willing to experiment. Then there are other things like cost of delay. Of course, cost of delay is an interesting concept which I'm not going to cover here, or cost of delay divided by duration, which is CD3. Okay. And if you're interested in the subject, I recommend you to look it up anywhere, Google. So value is a very interesting concept. For example, one of my clients was a very large fashion company, a multinational. So it's fashion, right? And in the fashion industry, image is very important. It is fashion. Image is very important. So for them, their digital image was extremely critical. But how can you quantify? How can you define the value of a good image on Twitter? Very hard to define. So we need to better understand what value really means and accept that there are different forms of value, and not all of them can be quantified. Sometimes you have to run experiments because you just have a gut feeling, or maybe you want to find out. And the only way to find out, since you cannot assess it from the beginning, is to try. Run an experiment, maybe it will fail, but you will learn. So that's the third thing you can do. First one, awareness. Second one, create a space. Third one, better understanding value and cost. Then there are practices that you can use. Okay? Practices that will help you create a multitude of options so that you can decide in which direction you want to go. Then again, it's a matter of making decisions as you go. Gojko Acic, for example, he suggested this approach, which is called impact maps. How many guys are familiar with impact mapping? Okay, a few of them, a few of you, about maybe 10, 15%. To the rest of the audience, I would recommend to look it up. It's a very simple and effective way of correlating what you do with why you do it. And in between, there is who can help you and how they can help you. Okay? So it's a very interesting way of creating a number of different options, not just one strict plan that you want to follow. Then there's another way of running disciplined experiments, which is probably not yet as popular as impact mapping. It's called the popcorn method. And I have to warn you that the author of this method is here in the room now. So if he's sitting right next to you, just pretend you didn't see him. Okay? Just pretend he's not here. Okay? Because he's Italian, he talks a lot, so don't ask him questions right now. Okay, I'm Italian too. Which is called the popcorn method. That's another way of running disciplined experiments on a regular basis, which is another way of exploring. Okay? So that's another thing you can do. There are practices that you can apply to deal with uncertainty by creating and managing multiple options. The other thing you can do is try to go deeper into the culture of your organization regarding making mistakes, for example. And one framework which I like to use sometimes comes from Robert Dilts. He's a psychologist, and basically this framework is divided in 5 levels, which you can read up there. There is the identity level, the values level, the skills level, the behavior, and the context. So rather than explaining what the logical levels or neurological levels sometimes called are, I'm going to show it to you. What I want to do is I want to take that statement by Daniel Ek, the one that said, okay, we want to make mistakes faster than anybody else. Okay, I want to take that statement and just as an experiment, try to analyze that statement according to this framework. So let's go. We aim to make mistakes faster than anybody else. So if I were to ask Daniel, okay, so who are you? Since you want to make mistakes faster than anybody else, who are you? One possible answer could have been, we are brave explorers of our business domain. That's an identity statement. We are explorers, and we are brave explorers of our business domain. Okay? And I could ask him, okay, so, and why do you do this? Which are your values? And he could reply something like, well, we value learning, and we don't like to blame people for mistakes. Okay? So we are brave explorers, and we value learning, and therefore we don't blame for mistakes. Okay? So how do you run your business? And that's the third level. Which are your skills? Oh, well, we're very well versed in empiricism. We understand what being empiric means. We apply a lot of empiric methods. We understand empiricism. That's a skill. It's not who you are, it's what you know, okay? And from there, you get behavior. So since we understand empiricism very well, we get rich feedback from fail-fast, fail-safe experiments. That's what we do. That's our behavior. We behave in such a way that we get rich feedback because we understand empiricism and because we value learning and because we are brave explorers. Okay? And the last level is context. Where do you do this? Well, we arrange small self-organized technical teams. They are highly autonomous. They can try what they want within certain limits, and off they go. That's the where and when. So if you are able to create this kind of alignment in your organization, maybe just talking with people, no? Just giving a sense of identity that maps to your values, that maps to your skills, that maps to your behaviors, that maps to your practices and the context, maybe you have a more profound impact rather than say, okay, let's do a sprint. Okay? That's the whole idea. The other thing is that you can do this in your personal life. If you want to practice dealing with uncertainty and discovery stuff, you can do this in your personal life as well. Because at the end of the day, it all boils down to three questions, which is my own or your own perception or assessment of risk, which is my own or assessment, perception of value, okay? And how can I create and manage options? So let me give you an example, a practical example. So I was born close to Venice, okay? So Venice, my own town. And when people come and visit, sometimes they ask me, okay, Andrea, so what should I see in Venice? I mean, there are so many things to see. What should I see? And my reply to them is usually, you know what? If you have the time, get lost. Don't have any plan, get lost. Okay? That's my usual reply. Why? First of all, because it's safe, assessment of risk. It's safe for two reasons. One, you are in a small island. There is no way you can get too much lost. Okay? You are going to hit the water after a while. Okay? So you cannot get too much lost. Second, in terms of crime, Venice is extremely safe. You can walk anywhere, anytime, and it's really an exception if there is any problem of crime in Venice. It's probably much riskier to cross the road down here. Okay? So risk is very safe, very well contained. Value, there's millions of things that you can find out, things that are not on tourist maps. Okay? So you can get a wonderful experience. And you can create and manage options. Which are your options? Well, let's go down this alley, or that alley, or maybe that alley. Okay, where should we go? Oh, let's go there. Oops, that alley. Go back. Failed experiment. Let's try that one. Okay, options. Okay. So that's one way to exercise discovery in your daily life. Perceive or assess risk for you, value for you, and options. And then decide as you go. But probably there are other ways. I'm going to leave this to you as a question. I mean, I gave an example, but the question is, if you really want to get better at discovering things and facing uncertainty in a smart way, what can you do in a personal life so that you can also bring it back into work, for example? So these are the things I've been thinking about recently, and I think we are doing fine with time, right? Yeah, which is good because I'm done. So just to wrap it up, first I started trying to give you a framework, which is composed of discovery, execution, optimization. And within this framework, you can find mindset, you can find practices, you can find business models, whatever. It's just a generic framework. My point is that I see no reason why I should oppose waterfall to lean to agile. I prefer to include rather than exclude. Okay? Every practice we have been using so far has its own dignity. So I don't see why we should try to fight with each other. Rather, let's try to get smarter. Second is that if we talk specifically about discovery, in my personal opinion, because then again, this is just my personal view on the subject, discovery is very much associated with an empirical approach, which is typical of the agile mindset. Okay? And of course, uncertainty comes into play. But we don't have to run away from uncertainty. We can get smarter at dealing with uncertainty